section of the afternoon in our second Agromin conference edition. We will be starting with a new topic this afternoon: competitiveness for agriculture and mining. Before starting this section, I can just remind you of the interpretation. You can click on enter, you can go through the English channel, and if you click on Jaikui, you will be listening to the interpreters of Quechua. We would like to thank to all the strategic partners that are joining us in this second edition of Agromin. AGAP, Asociación Agrip Chile, Anautas Mineros, Diana, Australian Chamber of Commerce, Itepapa, Core Foundation, Downing Teal, the INGEMET, Institute Crecer, NGO Futuro Sostenible, the Geographical Association of Lima, Women Seal, Peru. Thank you all of these partners for their support. We will be starting this section, a specific topic of this afternoon, the mining law and the so-called second agrarian reform. We have as moderator of this specific session, Rómulo Mucho. I welcome engineer Rómulo Mucho. Good afternoon. Thank you, Paula Fernanda, and thank you for the speakers and participants in panel members this afternoon. We have been hearing lots of different support messages from all those who were watching this conference. We are dealing with, it's such an important topic for the country. We need to know how to handle and manage all these different resources for the sake of our own development, the development of our people. I would like to thank the organizing committee, all professionals who have been participating and will be participating along these conference days. How can we mix these two topics, right? You may be thinking on mining law and the agrarian reform. How could that be possible? Are they closely related? Because in a specific territory, those two legislation pieces should work complementary, side by side. So I'll be starting by presenting our first speaker. We have a mining law that can be enhanced, updated. Apparently, this will of changing nature of this law and the agrarian reform. We have heard from the stakeholders themselves, those who know the countryside, those who have had important positions to share their views as well. Sometimes it's not so easy for all of us to understand the whole approach, but I will now give the floor to the speakers who will have 25 minutes for their presentations, and then I will only give the floor to the panelists of today, so he will be probably treated as the speaker. I'm the moderator of this section, and I'll be controlling time. The panel representative will be having 15 minutes for observations and comments. I will call Gabriela Amaro first. As an MBA of the UPC by IELE, of the University of Madrid, has been an executive director of AGAP, the Producer Agrarian Union. He has worked in the public sector, is part of the different sectors and ministries of production, telecommunication. He's also supported several projects, consultant of the ONP, as the director of the Consolidated Provisional Reserves of FONAPO, among others. Milton von Hesse. His BA in economics from the University of Pacifico with master's degree in economics from Georgetown University, director of Vidance Ministry of Housing, Construction and Sanitation, Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation, Executive Director for Inversión, General Director and Specialist of the DGPM of the Ministry of Economy and Finance, World Bank Officer in the Water and Sanitation Program, Officer in the Agricultural Development Unit of ECLAC. Augusto Cauce is a lawyer of the University Católica, Duke University, MA holder. He has worked in legal firms in the US and in Peru. He is corporate manager, regional manager of telecommunication system companies, Proinversión, partner, executive director of the Chamber of Australia in Peru. He is a former vice minister of mines. He's a consultant working on specific mining related issues, and he's a main committee consulting. Carlos Amaril León is a bachelor of the La Molina University, and PhD candidate of Wisconsin University. He's a professor, the Emery Professor of the Pacifico University, 3 times minister in a long list of several positions in the World Bank, IDB, among others. It's such a wonderful experience. I will be starting this section now. Gabriel, you have now 25 minutes time. Thank you, Romulo. Can you hear me? I want to apologize first. Now I am in La Joya in Arequipa, and I have to come to the Congress of the Agricultural Society of Arequipa, and I am having some issues with the internet. Therefore, I won't be able to turn off my camera, but I will speak to the mic. I think now you can see what I'm sharing, right? Perfect. Thank you for letting me know. Yes. Thank you, Romulo, for this introduction, and thank you for the invitation. I'm very pleased to join you. And I was being told to talk on the second agrarian reform, especially on how we look at this second agrarian reform and the importance of this for the country and the development that we are expecting as country. Can you see the second slide? Great, thank you. Okay, so you need to understand that Peru, it is located within the global food system. You sometimes feel that we are isolated, but this is such a confusing, huge graph showing the whole global food system. Each element of this system is complementary to the others. In our country, we have a whole food system itself, and that's also within this part we have the exporters, producers, companies, transportation, complementary services, all are interacting among themselves within this food system. Sometimes when you think on agriculture, you think on food security and you need to be self-sufficient. Therefore, you're focusing only on the local markets. And that's not totally true. Countries are now within a global system. They have competitiveness. There may be probably some strengths and weak points, but basically what the countries have done is to strengthen this global system and also enhance the exchange through the free trade agreements for imports and exports alike. When we say that any public policy have to look for self-sufficiency only, we're starting from the wrong point of view. We need to think on development within this global food system. And that's not something that I said myself. This is something that FAO highlights, and international organizations also works with the same logic. I would like to make some comments on the elements and numbers, features for the Peruvian market. So we have more than 2.2 millions of producers in Peru. The PEA represents more than 4 million, so 25%, according to the ILO. Only 4% will represent this specific sector. Here we are talking about small agriculture in that sense. That's 2.2 millions of production units. 64% is located in the highlands. Very cool scenario because of the geography and also because they're lacking connectivity. Here, we're not saying that these are businesses. Those are basically people that have their own land. And this will probably over 56% of the rural economic activity. This is just a brief overview of the agrarian sector. Informality represents a higher percent. You will say probably that will probably reflect numbers of Peru, and those are bad numbers. If we had 80% of informality, yes, it is true, but why do I color this circle differently? Because before, 10 years ago, it was 10%. So in the past 20 years, we have recovered 10% of that informal agriculture and we turn it into formal agriculture. And how? That's the question now. What modern formal agriculture, expert agriculture is probably the second exporting sector. We are not only a mining country, but we are also a ancestral agrarian or agricultural based economy. Why? Why is it so important then? And why do we have Romulus a promoter? Why do we have Agromin? Mining and agriculture, because these are the main key inputs for civilization. The first civilization in the region, Caral, more than 5,000 years. And in order to develop this specific civilization, they have to develop agriculture, but it is not an all simply old-fashioned. They were using science, they were using technology, technological and scientific means of those ages that were also linked to mining. Public policies are key. This general overview of the Peruvian agriculture are highlighted in here. We are referring to this modern agriculture that provides income to the country, the second most important export sector in Peru, and formality that has been reduced, and that both to depend on public policies. Public policies are not simply legislation or laws. They have to deal also with institutions and concrete actions in a specific area. To get into the topic, I will start by stating this dichotomy. Ideology. It is easy to get into this sort of struggle and demagogic approach and populism, and or we can search and look for competitiveness, productivity, and wealth creation. If we look at the examples of other countries and in Peru as well, we have two different pathways. We either go and select ideology or select competitiveness. I will probably like the second option. And I think that's probably what we all want, right? We want economic sectors to develop, want well-being, want health, wealth creation, we want job opportunities. And the only path is the second one, the one that is leading towards competitiveness. Let's have a look at the agrarian reform presented by the government. The elections have emphasized and provide focus to this specific topic. Lots of different parties focus on agriculture, which is important. And agriculture is still important for this government. But how we are managing agriculture? That's the question. The government has decided to carry out a second agrarian reform through a ministerial resolution sent on the 22nd of October. Remember that 22nd of September, sorry. Remember that when we were having some meetings with the minister, it wasn't that clear, but after this ministerial resolution, we got this specific proposal where you had food security association, cooperatives, water infrastructure, SIGRA, industrialization, markets. I think we all agree on these specific points. We all believe that these are important issues to handle, but again, the how is key. October the 3rd, the government launched the second agrarian reform in Ayacucho. Sorry, Cusco. This is a specific date where you celebrate the dictatorship. First of all, that could be a message that could be wrongly misunderstood. Are we going towards this first agrarian reform, expropriations that were there at that time? And this is real. This is something that the government, specifically the president, said at that time. A specific cabinet of agrarian and rural development. There were only government representatives, so basic public representatives, no private companies. First mistake. It's a wrong vision, as I said. Second, support measures. Two main points. The adjustments in the price putting to avoid any bad practices related to importation. And the starting or beginning of the fertilizer plant studies. On the price ranges, we were referring to specific setting of prices. We need to think that Peru is part of the world economy. As I show in the first graph, we need to be part of the world food system. That may also represent a big problem. Um, the fertilizer plant studies were coming back in a place where the government is business, using the resources of all Peruvians, and actually good conditions are required for the development of this sector. We could be very good intentions and we could actually agree with those. November the 6th, the president went to Apurimac, and you see that this is a real photo. Victor Maita sent a tweet with this photo and highlighted the fact that the president is leading the reform in the region. And again, the message will be, what exactly do we want? Do we want an agriculture without technology, using cattle, or do we want a modern agriculture when you're using technology, innovation, development, and you produce what the market requires and equal conditions? What do we want? Recently, November the 16th, we had a Supreme decree. You're not talking about 9 axes, we're talking about guidelines. Not 9 points, but rather 5. Implementing a new governance for the rural and agrarian world to promote and create new and more markets for family agriculture, foods, security, promote industrialization and transformation. These are all actually good guidelines. But again, when you get into the details, we had a specific item, 4.21, is like to protect the national production of the family agriculture through, again, some specific measures for protection in this price setting or other specific tariff measures and compensative measures. We are within the system as a country in the World Trade Organization. You need to also follow the rules of international trade and to take actions against dumping in meal competence, which are the trade-off of trade. Instead of actually promoting public policies that were already developed in years, we're coming back in time to specific issues that we have already experienced in the first agrarian reform. These are not just simply tips or suggestions, and basically issues are structural, which are the main structural problems of the second agrarian reform. I see 6 of them. It is probably the follow-up of the first one, which failed. The first agrarian reform failed, and you need to remember that, like movies, maybe remakes are not necessarily as that good. So if we really want to do that, we may probably have an issue. A bureaucratic point of view from the production's efforts and all the different concrete examples shown by businesses that there is a path through modern agriculture, the intervention of the government, the state in business activities. We already know that it does not work. The government has failed during dictatorship. And I recall a specific case of a factory in Paracas, which got the support of funds from foreign funds, and it is there in use. There's a lack of perspective of a modern, global, developed market. Why? Because again, businesses are not included. Inclusion of other producers and unions, you cannot exclude stakeholders. You need to include them into the reform, especially if we publicly stated that we want this participation so that this is successful for all, for citizens, for consumers, producers, and again, trade barriers. These are the six topics that I believe are issues that are not necessarily considered, highlighting the fact that no agrarian reform was needed. The agricultural law that provided such a leap and numbers. You have values from 1915 to 2000 for export values. When we got the approval of agriculture promotion, export were pretty low. As you can see, no matter what public policy or different reforms, that didn't work. That is a concrete fact. I'm not inventing any data. We got past a whole package, and up to now, agro export businesses grew exponentially, and that's a clear actual fact. For this to work for all, we need to take the cases that actually work. Second case, the law of agricultural promotion was not focused on businesses. It was for a specific production sector for chains that were oriented to modern markets. But there's a lot of, in this case, you have the mango range. You get how we get from this is really a small plots of less than 6 hectares. Of course, you have large, medium. So in this case, you have small producers, and even for a specific products where you are always have all in specifically very small producers of ginger. And of course, we got the benefits of this law and other producers along the coast and highlands and even in the rainforest area. Why? Because of a good public policy. One of these elements was the promotion of agriculture, which worked perfectly fine. Case 3, within this specific legislation and the focus on agro exports, you have a specific case of a small farmers association. You have these small groups of families who come together. This is called Las Molinos de Cajanleque, and they provide services and got into a value chain for Argus production. They were working for medium, large, and small companies, and they learned the technique. They get technified, and they get the support of Agrideas after a few years to build their processing plant. The idea specifically for K3 is that I recall meeting them in the fair in Hong Kong. We see Carlos Zamorano from IPE with Agroideas in the Peruvian pavilion. This is a PPP effort from AGAP together with From Peru every year. And but not only here, in Berlin and all the different fairs we visit where products of Peru are exposed. No matter which size, small, medium, or large, producers with high quality, good products. This specific example is important. They come to me because they want to support directly. And I recall they shared their thoughts in China. Of course, at the time they weren't doing this. And last year, they exported directly. These 73 families were exporting to the US. A small family producers that got involved into this new modern that did not require a second agrarian reform. Case 4 comes from Spain, Almeria in Spain. This was a desertic area, like in Chabemochic or Ica or Olmos. And now you have more than 32 million hectares for medium, small family farming, but also, do I still have time, Romulo? Sorry, you have 5 more minutes. Thank you. So without a need of a second agrarian reform and with the support of the academia, the business, they work on this big cluster. This area is now known as the European food country. Basically, they export for Europe. I'm now in La Joya. Imagine Majes one to Peru simply by enhancing our agricultural efforts. We can do this as Peruvians. What are the risks and real problems? Populism, that's one. Of course, a law that um, simply blind to the reality, like the law 31110. Um, I'll just repeat the words of the Ministry of Economy and the current BCR president. It is impressive that a specific prayer by the Congress is said. We have seen a huge growth in numbers and salaries lately, and he just was surprised by the fact of the setting of prices. What has the minister said? He disagreed. He said this may have strong impacts. After the passing of this law, you will have a long queue of people looking for jobs and less companies willing to hire them because numbers won't match. Especially formality in the agricultural sector has to go through all this huge process and bureaucracy that does not necessarily make us competitive. These are just few of the institutions that the businessmen have to go through when they want to open some specific formal businesses in agriculture in this country. Bad regulation affects basically reduction of competitiveness and of course the deterioration of business climate and investments new or future. So it definitely have impacts on the economic growth, on employment creation. It increases poverty. It negatively affects the quality of life and well-being, increase of social unrest, the deficient public management. This is a chart of Pacifico University showing then we have such a reduction of a project execution. We have a problem at the macro level and regional level. Irrigation projects, stop corruption. That's another problem. 22 out of the 25 regional presidents are going through any sort of corruption case. This cannot be possible. When you have such a good law stating to the audience that this will and can continue when the message of the government is respect the legal piece of law of the Peruvian state, and you update it with a different law that not only plays against the businesses, but the destruction of the middle class, and to probably also impact those going throughout poverty levels. But you're increasing salaries without a technical support. Remember, this specific law was not approved by the group, the technical team of workers or employees that should have reviewed it. So this informality, which at this stage is 80%. I do not have more time to explain these details, but basically we're getting and, and the Global Competitiveness Report of the World Economic Forum, we are place 65. How do we make this country gain more competitiveness? The private sector is there, knows what to do in order to be more competitive in the market. We are asking the government to let us help, but we do not have enough spaces to work together to try to promote the agricultural sector. What do we need? We need not second reforms, but a transformation that will include some elements that were, yes, included in the first agrarian reform, but that were missing specific skills. And of course, that we're not looking at the production force and the private sector efforts. We are part of this global market. We need to provide sustainability not only to the family, small businesses, SMEs, national and international support should be also enhanced. We need to include family farming too. The modern value changes have to be competitive as well. We need to increase competitiveness as a success vision of a global market. That's also important. Any reform won't work if we don't look at the market. You need to respect private property, provide legal safety, improve legislation, not only the agrarian legislation, but all the cross-cutting laws to bring investments. We need to be more competitive than the others in the region, have good agricultural practices and processing practices that is nowhere to found in these documents. High levels of productivity. Free trade has to be respected, and we need to keep on promoting it without barriers to reduce informality and create trust. Create trust among the different stakeholders. Zero uncertainty. So which are the main challenges? And with that, I'll end up. basically to improve the business, climate regulation and competitiveness, public management and institutionality so that we can bring investments, create sustainability, increase economic growth, create employment opportunities, reduce poverty, improve quality of life and well-being of people, create opportunities, and to reduce informality so that all Peruvians could have labor and human rights. Agriculture is not a problem. Peruvian agriculture is part of the solution. Let us create this well-being and be part of modern agriculture. Thank you very much. And I'm willing to reply to all your comments and
Muchas
questions.
gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Excellent presentation. And well, the knowledge for Peruvians. Now we have the participation from Milton. You have the floor, Milton. Thank you. Thank you, Romulo. I'm going to share my screen. I'm just going to share my presentation and I will begin immediately with the presentation. The good thing is that I'm speaking after Gabriel because he already gave some of the concepts that I was going to discuss, and this will enable me to go a little bit faster. Allow me start by saying, okay, basically this presentation has two parts. One, where I thought was to have some reflections regarding the pertinence, the relevance of this set of measures announced called as the second agricultural reform. But for this, we need to elaborate on the concept of agricultural reform and what is the background in Peru and what is the situation now in this time, the structure of ownership of lands in the agricultural sector. In the second part, I will discuss the vision of the government on this second reform, and I will make some comments regarding this vision. And finally, I will have some conclusions and recommendations. Just to remind you, repeating what I have in the slide, but the agrarian reform is a process that takes place in economies and societies where there is a structure of large property of the land tenure in those countries where the big ownership is prevailing for different historical circumstances, ask for the need to make a reform in agriculture. What's the meaning of agricultural reform? If we look in the literature on the topic, it's a process for expropriation of land and allocation of lands to farmers who didn't own the land. That is the international consensus, what is understood as an agricultural reform. We have several examples. The Mexican Revolution that developed an agricultural reform. In Bolivia in the 50s, they also developed an agricultural reform at the end of the 50s. In Cuba as well in the 50s, and in Chile in 1962, there were also agricultural reforms. And Peru in 1969 also started the process, which was rather aggressive for the agricultural reform. Here, I would like to mention some of the characteristics of the agricultural reform that we had in the country. So everybody can remember, or if you didn't know, you can learn that this agricultural reform started by means of a decree law 17716 that regulated this process with some characteristics for the redistribution of land. What happened? What was the characteristic of this process of agricultural reform from a later perspective? It was of a massive character. At the beginning, the agricultural reform was going only to affect the large ownerships, and it was not going to affect the lands that were below 100 hectares. This didn't happen. The reform became very radical as it was implemented, and at the end, it affected both the large pieces of land and also the medium and small size properties. Several years ago, I was a member of a public committee of the people who had been impacted by the agricultural reform, and the largest number were in the middle and small producers that are still complaining to the state for the indemnification because they were affected by the reform. So it affected all the in the country. The second characteristic of the reform is they eliminated the market of agricultural lands. The property of the land was not transferable. Some informal transactions continued in the 80s when democracy was back, but they eliminated the market of agricultural lands. It was prohibited to sell the land. A third characteristic was that this reform had a significant collateral impact. And it's very similar to what is implicit in what we hear right now. They ended up by decreasing the private investment and the look for profit in agriculture. Based on the agricultural activity, the generation of profits was not accepted. And in opposition, they promoted the cooperatives for production in the coast, in the highland, where the agricultural associations are of social nature. So the regime, the private entrepreneurial regime, was replaced by a collective regime of the agricultural property. In this context, when they talk about cooperatives, we are referring to the fact that the property belongs to everyone. And then we go to 1984. The picture from the 80s, when the process of agricultural reform had passed, we see a high fragmentation of ownership. By mid-80s, we had 4 million hectares cultivated in the hands of 1.57 million families. So each family has a little piece of land, 2.9 hectares per family, that they could be in several locations at the same time. Even in some areas like Puno, they had 5 properties per family, small plots of land in the hands of each agricultural family. Peru became a structure with many properties of land, and therefore some researchers say that it is an agriculture of gardeners. In the 90s, there was an opening, some structural reforms. They revert the distribution measures of the agricultural reform and the possibility to own land open again. a new constitution is created, and in 2000 there is the law for the agricultural promotion. However, all of this that can be shown in this table, that we can see the situation of Peruvian agriculture today compared to other countries in the region. In Peru, for instance, in the country are the properties below 10 hectares. 89% of the plots in Peru have less than 10 hectares, which is a rather higher percentage than the one in Colombia, Chile, and Mexico. Likewise, for instance, we see that Peru, the ownership of big lands is restricted to very few experiences. Only 2% of the plots in the country have more than 50 hectares, compared to Colombia, that it's more than double, 5%, Chile, 13%, and Mexico, which is around that figure. To summarize, what I want to say is that in this graphic is that Peru, as a consequence of the agricultural reform and everything that happened after that reform, still prevails the mini property, many pieces of land, and therefore it is not valid to use a concept that is referred to expropriation or redistribution of land when you call second agricultural reform to a process that is not related at all. I could invent a championship of soccer and say that that is the World Cup. People are going to laugh, but that is just a soccer championship. It is not the World Cup. So we're going to talk about the second agricultural reform in Peru. This concept is being used as the second agricultural reform. The Ministry of Agriculture has announced that one of the main axes of this government, it is one of the concepts that they feel very proud of in the government from their perspective. As Gabriel said, little what is on the paper and the details reform tries to strengthen and revalue the work of 2 million of small producers of the of field producers. This is one of the concepts that is being disseminated by the ministry. It also says that they will execute without expropriations or confiscations, but it will promote more social inclusion of small producers. The second agricultural reform has 9 axes that we're going to discuss later. Something that they state is that the second agricultural reform agriculture generates several discussions. Well, the non-family agriculture and the business agriculture and the subsistence agriculture make more sense. These are the axes. I'm not going to repeat them because this was already mentioned by Gabriel. I just want to call your attention that from the ministry, they promoted these 9 axes. In the discourse of the president, there are some contradictions and lack of agreement with this. But I would like to mention that none of these axes are new, but they've been applied by the Ministry of Agriculture or they were applied at some point in time. The one that concerns me is when they call this approach of food security from family agriculture. That is only thinking under this title that sounds very reasonable. When you look at the contents, they are isolating from the international trade, trying to have going back to systems of protection in the past and maximum permissible. When in Peru, we already have all the evaluations that have been made to that type of mechanisms in the past. I recommend you to read the work of Javier Escobar in the 90s and at the beginning of 2000 about the effects regarding the band of prices. It was shown that it was not a stabilization mechanism, it didn't contribute, and it didn't contribute to improve the income of the poorest ones. And the benefited were those farmers, the largest farmers of each one of these protected crops. So they generated profits for a few ones, not for everyone. When we talk about promotion of partnership, if we talk about partnership on the basis the government pays subsidies, when you talk about the cooperatives, you are not talking about European or North American or modern cooperativism, then we know how this ends up. When we talk about hydraulic infrastructure and sowing and harvesting of water, how can you disagree with this? Which doubled the budget at the Ministry of That's very good. The advantages of this are huge in a country where only 35% of the agriculture is produced with irrigation systems and the rest waits for rainfall. So this is a good measure. The Agricultural Civil Service, the SIGRA, that is for students go to be trained in the field. Yes, that makes sense, but I don't know if that is going to change the productivity in the country. Agricultural industrialization. That happened in the modern economy. In any valley like Naturi or Viru, but what gets my attention when they talk about agricultural industrialization, it is like I open a plant entrepreneurial capacity. And then we have many examples that giving away the plants with business capacity and without the knowledge of the market, the experiences fail. Promotion of markets for producers and state acquisitions. and high quality at prices that were unreal, and then the poorest ones were suffering because there was corruption, and the end the project had to be postponed. The seven has many details. It says livestock repopulation, genetic improvement, and pastures. This makes sense, especially this is a contribution that it is good for the strategy of climate change. There is an IDB project giving very good results, but we don't know what is going to happen because we do not have the details. Intergovernmental and intersectoral articulation in the territory. This makes sense, but we do not know what they are talking about. The Office of the Prime Minister has the strategy with national agencies for development, but we still have to see what happens. Finally, they talk about the promotion of credit through the banking. Uh, in the last 3 years in Peru, two agricultural banks have gone to bankruptcy. And in 2015, one bank has a delinquency rate, and many things have happened. And after 5 years, 9 out of 10 soles that the state had in the Agrobanco have not been returned. This bank went into bankruptcy, and told how they are going to promote the credit, if they are speaking about the credit to invest, to train, or if they are speaking about subsidies for increasing the income of the people. And this is a series of problems when the tool and the objective are not clear, when they think that the credit is a tool for social assistance. To summarize, according to my opinion, these 9 axes mentioned are the second agricultural reform, starting by the good things. There are some measures that make sense. There are some that are very bad, and to be very bad, they are in red. And there are some that it will depend on how they develop. Finally, I will finish with these conclusions. The first one is that the so-called agricultural reform, second agricultural reform, does not have anything to do with the concept of the traditional agricultural reform. This concept does not fit in a structure of production where the mini ownership prevails. This is a set of measures of sectoral policy, some of which generate bad results, others generate good results, and the remaining ones we have to wait to see what they are about. The highest emphasis is aimed at the benefit of the commercial agricultures that compete with the imports. This is a program made by the farmers with advisors of Fondeado to benefit the farmers commercial of the associations of Cumbiave. This is very clear. And those who are not with that approach will have to watch on TV what is going to happen with agriculture, because they will feel some negative effects of these policies. The bias of sectoral politics is clearly anti-business and anti-exporter. They have not considered family agriculture for subsistence. None of these take into consideration the farmer that allocates more than half of the production is for self-consumption, and the other half is inserted in the market with an offer that is recognized, because that farmer is not considered in what we have mentioned so far. And they don't speak anything about the forest sector, so we don't know. And with this, I would like to finish. The the presentation. And if you have any questions, excellent. Thank you. Really, every time we have more arguments for the calm of everybody that follows us. We have to disseminate this information in Peru. Nobody wants the family agriculture to fail. We need a good strategy to work with the smallest one to the largest farmer. Now we are going to Milton, sorry, to Augusto. Augusto, thank you. Thank you, Romulo. Thank you for the presentation. Allow me to greet those who are in the panel with us.
Y mi saludo a todos los que nos están viendo por las redes o sea por el Zoom.
Greetings to those of you who are listening via Zoom and the other different channels of communication of Agromin. I will try to be brief and I will focus more on the mining sector and probably more related to the legal issues since that's part of my work. But I will first start with the comparison mining and agriculture because I believe that they do share few issues and that's probably the heart of Agromin. I wasn't thinking on discussing on the agrarian reform myself, but rather to give the balance of the other side and probably just highlight some of the facts that may be useful and interesting to share for both cases. I think that now you can see what I'm sharing, isn't it? Mining law and second agrarian reform. That's the title of my presentation, but I will be focusing more on the I just stated. Which are the main topics that I will discuss today? This is the agenda of my presentation today. Basically, try to reflect on the global trends, especially thinking on our topography. Basically, the main goal for these two activities is sustainable development in the areas where both activities are carried out so that we can then go to critical problems. And there I will start by highlighting some strength to face adversities, and later I would like to talk on legal aspects. I won't reinvent the wheel. I will basically talk about the CDMS and exactly what will be suggested under the work which was carried out by this specialist working group where I worked 1 year and a half ago. Some conclusions on the legal reforms that are needed in order to search for competitiveness and why to do so. And that will be probably at the very end because this probably create these last reflections to move them and translate it into actions. Which are the world trends? I think that this applies probably to both sectors. We're living in the pandemic. There are specific characteristics under this specific period. We're also undergoing a severe economic and COVID-19. And this is a worldwide effect with few cases of quick recoveries, but we are also facing issues related to climate change, global warming. We listened to COP26 and the coverage of these different topics. Maybe agreements are not as satisfactory, but there is a concern that are including all the different economic activities, the whole use of fossil world trend related to the care to nature. The green economy is one of the pillars to be used, the transition to renewable energies. Also linked to the mining sector, when we talk about, you will believe that looking at the final product or the solar panel and how do they work with that. But basically, we need mining in order to achieve this technology. We need metals in order to have these technologies, and also healthy food security. It may seem that it applies only to the agriculture, but I also link to the mining sector. I think the mining sector has shown during the pandemic how important it is to talk about a specific food security to avoid the large transportation of the first stages of the pandemic, the uses of new modern technologies. Digitalization is being added into several sectors, and I believe that the mining sector was one of the sectors that has shown more resistance through these ages because of that use of new technologies. And also agricultural sector has used technologies in their production, and this have been reflected in the results that we had seen in the past years. Electromobility and remote work. These are probably the new trends, new paths that will set the ground, that will lead our conversations. We should not only focus on the local, what we are currently living in Peru. We should open our eyes and look at what is happening abroad so that we can, based on that, apply things that could work in here as well. If we translate this into Peru, geography is key. We need to open dialogue among the different stakeholders. We need to work together because of these several activities that are carried out at the three different regions. Upstream that will go from the highlands to the coastline and to the sea, and also via the Amazon region as well. How to make this a point to get together rather than divide ourselves. I think that this is probably one of the main challenges for all of us. Geography, our natural resources, is the one that mandates our path. And what will be the aim? I think goals and objectives are probably very similar in both sectors. Territorial sustainable development should be the goal, the aiming at the development of territories. In some cases, you will have mining, in some others, you will have fishing or agriculture and other sectors to create more economic opportunities and well-being in that specific area, to feel the impact of development, especially in those areas. Of course, with environmental responsibility that should be treated with the best technology, with the best capacities, and with authorities that should survey on time, precisely. They should be probably divided into these two different elements to strengthen competitiveness, create well-being for the communities surrounding in the projects or mining projects so that we can collaborate to the country. And I'm adding something in here. The collaboration can be said in between these two different activities. Of course, the government plays an important role, the proper regulation in place, but competitiveness, new technologies that could be interchange, uh, creating well-being of neighboring communities, no matter what of the economic activity in the region. That's, I believe, essential. And coming back to the mining sector, there are issues, critical issues that we are all aware of. I'm dividing these critical problems into 4 boxes, which I believe are the ones that are impacting in social, environmental, reputational. We have a strong legacy that's still behind us, and the legal institutional one, which is also critical, not only because of the legislation per se, but also institutions, people, people that are the ones auditing and assessing the rule of law. We still are missing capacity building at all different level, regional, local, national level, and the different sectors of the economy. And mining is not the exception to the rule. And next to it, we have this issue colored differently because it's a context issue. As I said before, you see a quick recovery compared to other places, but of course that has created other type of issues, economical, political, health, labor issues. But in the mining sector, and probably as well in the agricultural sector, we have a list of strengths. This is a leading sector. I think we should be proud of having a leading sector worldwide, in this case mining, especially when looking at electromobility and energy transition. We could still be leading with products such as copper. And which are our strengths? Geological potential for sure, mining tradition, pre-Hispanic time, tradition, maybe pre-Incan time as well. So it is more than 200 years of tradition, human talent, capacity building, a long time, different stages and levels of learning that has been widespread, and prices of energy that has also supported the development of the sector, and has also include energy in places whenever there is a mining project, energy comes together to complement the whole system and provide energy not only to the site but also to neighboring areas in the country. And another important element that I believe is important is the resilience. Just by looking at the fact that we work isolated for certain periods of times, and far away distance where we have specific medical facilities on site. It has been a resilient activity that has still moved on during the different stages of the pandemic. Of course, we had a huge deficit on health facilities and health service new to anyone, but basically the sector could easily overcome these problems, and agriculture has also shown good resilience in natural elements. It's an open space, ventilated, so it is also a resilient area. And the last point, which I still believe it's a strength, even though we have still been experiencing such instability, especially for investment and the rule of law. We have seen an impact to these factors, but I believe that in the last years we have been well known for being a country that promotes investments, that treats private, public, national, or international investors in a good way. So I believe that that's still there. I believe that that's also a tool that is part of our brand, and I believe that that could be also sustained on time. And this is probably one of the tasks, pending tasks of this government. So these are the results by 2020. Exports were a little bit low compared to pre-pandemic times, but you see the money transfers to the regions because of the taxes that maybe it's hard to read, but you have more than 4 millions in 2020. So we are actually referring to large amounts of money, and you see then the link with this strength.
¿No? ¿Cómo llevamos entonces toda esta problemática a tratar de resolverla? Y yo creo que no solamente un
How
tema
we
de...
solve this issue? It's not only an issue of changing laws. In 2019, October, that year, we were together with 8 specialists with lots of prestige, independent, with high level of ethics. We have the Minister of Mining as part of the team with the support of the private sector. We prepared this report. It's a report that shows a specific were delivered last year. And this is the final report on sustainable mining development. The methodology we applied is basically desktop work. We held interviews, surveys with public sector, businesses, universities, institutes, research centers, NGOs, indigenous populations. We go through the Ministry of Culture, embassies, binational chambers of commerce, and citizens who were able to provide suggestions via website. We work under 5 specific topics: is social, citizen diversity, territory, environmental management, regulatory improvement, tax changes and uses of mining resources. You could have a diagnosis, an overview, consequences of these different impacts, and finally, alternatives or proposals for solution that I believe are quite interesting. The Commission also was based on specific assumptions. Mining investments to fight against poverty, social conflicts are a permanent risk of the mining activities. Mining could be also leveraging the development of different territories, and in the balance of the mining law of 1992 review, we conclude that there was no need to make changes or amendments to the law. Most of the social or environmental issues and the whole development of territories and the well-being have to do with other regulations, with infrastructure, with gaps that are not filled effectively at a social level. And also decentralization was topic covered on subnational governments and the new institutions. What this means, the complexity of the mining operations and how this becomes a critical issue for this specific activity, and recommendations and proposals. Some have summarized some in here to have a sustainable mining. The Commission identified specific proposals. So we have 20 proposals around social issues, environmental recommendations, 9 related to regulatory measures, enhancement, 13 on tax issues, 11 on informal and illegal mining. So around 85. This is the number of proposals that are included in this report. Even though legal changes are important, I think there are other issues that are as important that have to do with management and public policies as well. Strategic recommendations probably the broader and more relevant recommendations on a public policy that's pending, specifically for sustainable development on the mining sector, to set up the vision development to the territorial level, a new model to promote mining exploration. If we would like to think on and help to fight against poverty, exploration is key. If we are not exploration is like research in other areas. If we do not explore the mining sector, it should not be necessarily looked at the operational mining activity. This is how we have thought of it traditionally. We have to think out of the box, and instead of looking at these other processes, related activities and a larger impact, exploration has a lower impact. It is a risky activity, it's intensive in capital, but it has lower impacts on other sides. And this is a space and time where different parties can negotiate and can think and reflect on their own development. Of course, early assessment and collaboration in measures of protection in climate restoration, reform, public management, informal mining, which is also a procedure that have to be reviewed. I won't get into details, but it is also part of the report, illegal mining, which for sure has to be something we need to fight against. It is definitely impacting the environment, health. It also come closer to other illicit activities, and I believe that's something that it is not only mining involved, but it's also other areas of should be considered: transparency for good governance, citizenship and indigenous people, in the continuous improvement of the legal framework with new technologies, digitalization could also be enhanced. In general terms, these proposals are not only legal related, part of it does, but most with public policies and other management tools. In conclusion, a legal reform is needed. It is important, unique, sole thing to do. So you're always calling for a new reform, a new law on mining. Yeah, some adjustments, amendments can be made, but the result is there. I think what the sector has been showing, it's, I won't repeat it. So we have the numbers, the taxes, the GDPs, the value chain. I won't get into those details, but that sorry, apology. I just, my image got frozen and I lost the, sorry, I'm not sharing my PPT right now. Apologies. I think you were at the very end. Oh, yes, sorry, sorry. Just to end this part, Romulo, I think that all these different conclusions I share with you, it is to come to public policy agreements to set public policies, improve the regulatory framework, yes, institutions, yes, but under a condition to achieve competitiveness in the Peruvian legislation that is also competing with others. It is not just simply changing the law by changing it. You have to have a goal. You want to create competitive to attract investments to strengthen our potential and see the benefits. And this will be it then. Thank you.
Creo que justo llegamos a los 24 minutos.
I got to 25 minutes, I think.
Gracias, Augusto.
Thank you, Augusto. Excellent speech, excellent presentation, talking about the legal framework according to the new general law of mining. The results will mandate at the end. Now we have to go to our master, Carlos. He was the panel member, but he has a lot to say too. So, Carlos, you have the floor now. Can you hear me? Yes.
Entonces, un abrazo a todos. Extraordinario, riquísimo el contenido.
Extraordinary How do we have all Peruvians 2 plus 2 gives 4? All the experiences shared today and yesterday are extraordinarily clear that it is not for everyone. But I think that the point of this presentation is the future is decided today. And in Peru, we have to overcome this definition on what has been discussed on the basis of development that are decided today. Here, this is the book, Peru, Our Peru of Every Day. To me, this would be the baptism for all Peruvians, so we can sit in this territory in which we live, which is very original, very diverse, with mega diversity, and speaking about agricultural reform without considering the different ecosystems and the different productive systems with different cultural traditions, regional traditions. That's awful. I will just stick to a geographic space and we're going to see what is social profitability and how the economic system is operating, good or bad. But there is an economic system working in each region. Let's say the example of Majes Siwas. There was a sponsor for this work,
el que apoyó mucho
and there was a lot of support of what we're going to talk.
el gran
This
tablazo
is
de la región sur, la
the
cabecera
big head
del desierto de
of the
Atacama,
desert of Atacama in the south region, one of the places with the highest solar radiation in the world. And that is a lot of energy, like the energy Saudi Arabia. But with fossil energy, here we have solar energy for electricity. Photosynthesis is nothing else than taking advantage of energy,
eso es el crecimiento de la
and that is the growth.
Perdón, Carlos.
¿sí?
Carlos, disculpa, no vemos la presentación.
We cannot see your presentation. Are
No
you?
la veo. Ay, perdona. Yo la subí.
I see it, but
A ver,
Ahora,
Intenta colocar, compartir pantalla. Ahora sí la vemos, hay que colocarla en pantalla grande solamente.
okay,
bien.
we see it.
ahora sí.
Okay, now it's okay.
Bueno, entonces ahí teníamos
So here
el gran
we have
subir lo anterior.
the
Entonces,
big scenario.
qué bien que Augusto haya presentado esto. Este es el
Well,
primer
I am glad that Augusto presented this chapter
es el capillo
where he said that
lo que nace y ver
it is like the registration for each Peruvian that is born to see what country we have,
del ecosistema en el cual
talking about the ecosystem where the future is built today.
propósito del proyecto de Majes 2.
And I was talking about the project Mahisi was 2 as an example of future construction in the world of the 21st century.
El tablazo
So we have in the south
de Matarani,
Tablazo in Matarani,
de Majes
Tablazo in Mahesi was
1800 metros sobre el nivel del mar,
at 1,800 meters above sea level, the city of Arequipa 2,300 meters above sea level,
que es donde se capta
and the White Cordillera where the water is collected for all the corridor of energy in Arequipa, and where it is the potential of 1,000,000.2 hectares of natural pastures to be irrigated and to generate livestock. As people from New Zealand said, this is a new New Zealand in Peru, to have an efficient production of beef and milk, and in the upper section, the alpacas. All of this is intertwined. So let's move into the discussion. Well, this is what is called the Campiña, and this is the big challenge, how we have these crops of maize, onions, to other types of crops like blueberries, strawberries, peaches or pears for export. How do we use the trickle irrigation and not like 500 years ago with channel systems that so far are being with the same criteria in a place of the solar radiation in the world with 9 to 12 hours of sunlight, 362 days a year. This solar energy has to be collected to generate a resource. But here, with an agriculture that goes back 5,000 years, if we took the leap to trickle irrigation, we would be saving 2/3 of water. And we wouldn't expose the water in the channels with the pollution and contamination of waste. So there would be an irrigation with nutrients to increase the yield and the quality. Like, for example, here we have the onions, 45 tons per hectare, but with trickle irrigation, they, a farmer would be getting 120 tons of onion per hectare, from 40 to 120. Just simply technology that was used 5,000 years ago. Today, the trickle irrigation is the day-to-day in the agricultural management of the 21st century, and also changing the crops from maize or alfalfa to blackberries. We moved from agriculture that goes back 1,000 years to one of blackberries that gives investment. I'm not speaking about expanding the area with this small agriculture. The capitalization is not good. The partnership of the small producers by making partnerships neighbors' lands. We're not talking about the stock of land, but about the quality of knowledge and technology and the institutional capacity, not only relate this area in the modern markets. This is Majes 1. We have put $1.3 billion in the past 40 years in 92 kilometers of tunnel, with 16 kilometers of channels and tunnels coated. I correct, $1.1 billion since we had the first explosion at the tunnel. Well, this was the past technology, an open channel exposed to evaporation of this solar radiation, where there is a high percentage of evaporation. All the money that we have invested is to collect water, to bring it from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And in the second stage, the water that comes from the Atlantic, we took it to the Pacific through open channels with this solar radiation. So the logical thing is to have a pipeline for the water. Suggesting if the water evaporates, the dollars are evaporating. We need to have a tube, we need to make a pipe and to have a meter, 2 plus 2. But it didn't happen because in 2017, in Arequipa, they requested an amendment to make this correction. And the additional cost was $110 million. That was the additional cost to make water pipelines, 2017, 4 years. And we will see the other figures of Majes 2 will generate $1.1 million a year with the production. And these 4 years lost, we didn't generate $4.4 billion for the farmers, for Arequipa, for the region, for the country. And after 4 years of discussion with arbitration technicians, finally, they reached the conclusion that it is not $110 billion, but $104 billion, and they accepted this addendum to intubate the water, to have the pipes for water. The budget only needs the signature of the Arequipa region. So you can see, 4 years, we had $4.4 billion of production to save $6 million, we lose $4 billion because of the flow of production. As you see, for Peruvians, 2 plus 2 do not add up to 4. This is Majes 1, 5 hectares. This is a jewel of $1.1 billion. It's like having a cow at a jewel store. And now, in the past 10 years, they are changing into products of export. It is not more than 5,000 hectares that have made the change. Those who are purchasing the land are the informal people from mines, from Acari, Nazca, and they are purchasing their country homes for the weekend. You can see this is Majes 1, $1.1 billion for that, with an aspersion irrigation that could be improved. The leap that we have to make in Majes 2 is to bring the water in pipes. You can see on the left the technological improvements with a computer control to start the trickle irrigation. And we're talking about the different type of system. We would be saving water from 23,000 cubic meters per hectare, but he mentioned 4,000 cubic meters. Majes 1 has 23,000 cubic meters because, you know, at night people measure as they wish, but the most expensive water in the world. Just think to move to a different type of irrigation from 4,000 cubic meters. That would be 5 times less of water that can be released to expand more territories. In Siwas, Pampa Siwas, it is not only 38,000 hectares, it is more. So if we use the water well from Majes 1 and Majes 2, we can expand the frontiers of Tablazo with release of water with a technological leap. And there you can see the new productive system, artichoke, avocado, grapes, onions, cotton, tomato, vegetables. And here you have the production that would take place, plus the production of the industrial processing. Talking about the 1.1 million I was talking about. This product with different types of products, with other type of organizations, other types of technology, it would have 186,000 new employments, 106,000 direct employments, and 80,000 in the industrialization process. And we are not counting the employment in terms of logistics to the port for the export from Matarani. So in order to put in production these hectares with this type of high technology, we have an expansion wave of growth. To put in production these $1.1 million in the field and to have an industrial processing, a production of fertilizer, production chain for transportation, other types of supply of electricity, and the labor force. All the logistics has to be supported by mechanical workshops and for the management of knowledge and training. And also, you need to have the greenhouses for seeds, commercial houses, companies of machinery, companies for services and logistics, universities, etc. And that will generate employment. We have to put together the goods and services of logistics. So these 38,000 hectares that produce $1.1 billion can operate. But these 186,000 workers, I'm not counting the workers of the expansion waves to the right that will also generate employment, formal employment. This would be linked to a technological strength. If we multiply by 4, we are in the potential order of 7 million people by 2030, 2050. So here we are accounting the impact on the employment. In addition, all these processes pay the tax, the general sales tax, and also the tax for personal income. You can see the taxes burden, direct taxes, and especially the general sales tax. Everything in the flow of employment and unemployment, those families that need to live nearby. And in that home, as consumers, 40% of the income is for food. This is data from 2019. 20% in housing, 11% in transportation, 8% education. So this is the expenditure of a family. And for that family to live with that level of income, they will pull the food chain of the sales at the corner stores and the small markets and transportation, the wholesale markets and the production in the region of the south. All the construction of houses will push all the pull all the construction chain, service of architecture, engineering, hardware work and electricity work, obviously transportation, education, health. All of these items are value chains that are generated by the final consumption for the families, but that they are supplied by all these chains for which it is necessary to have the support of logistic infrastructure from institutions and the government, also clusters for businessmen, banking, health, insurance, hospital systems, educational systems, and universities. So, Arequipa cannot have other 700,000 inhabitants because the Campiña will disappear. And by 2050, with more than 1 million inhabitants, they won't be able to survive due to problems of the solar radiation. So, in Pedregal, they already built 16,000 hectares of alfalfa, and recently with some fruit products. It is the second city of Arequipa, El Pedregal, with 50,000 inhabitants. El Pedregal is a big shantytown. Each productive system generates a center of services. I'm not talking about the fantasy with this design of the green city, because in 1940, Arequipa built Selva Alegre, which is the dream of every citizen in Arequipa, because they have the water fountains and the trees. Here we're talking about Selva Alegre, the new green city. Many Arequipa families are building their country houses in La Joya. I am not inventing anything, the wheel. This has to continue, otherwise the residents of the other 700,000 will be the city of Arequipa, like an explosion in the city of Arequipa. You have 5 minutes. So I would like to finish. This is the technology. It's on the way and it has to be managed. Let's move to the 800,000 hectares in production in the Peruvian coast. This person is making the irrigation with a pail and like they did 5,000 years ago. But there is another neighbor that has the trickle irrigation, and the other one is washing the soil to plant tangerine and avocados. 2/3 of the water can be saved to expand 2 times fold the land in our country. You can realize about the potential that we have here. If we move to trickle irrigation, and we would achieve half savings in water, and they could have 2 or 3 harvests a year, because every day of the year you have an extraordinary greenhouse in this Peruvian coast to send it to the international markets, just like the mining or just by itself. So that step to move from the maize to some other crops, like nuts, 60,000 hectares, peaches, $20,000, $30,000 per year. This is the blackberries. In the Supe Valley, with like a Martian view. And this is the water collection from the groundwater in these reservoirs for the computerized trickle irrigation. And each plant is numbered according to the species, and the computer will have the irrigation with nutrients. And we have 440,000 hectares for the future. So I would like to finish now. The regional government of Arequipa cannot manage this. 2 plus 2 is 4. My God. I appeal once more to Milton when he was in Ministry of Housing, and when they were executing groups, that was working. We have a corporation of development as the Institute for Development, with professionals of high level, with responsibility in their professions, with regional boards, but they need to have the career, the profession, like the people from the Central Reserve Bank. The regional governments are not working, and the future of the country that is decided today is decided for what I have heard yesterday and today. We do not have any other institutional structure for the execution. If we don't have that, the country will go to hell. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. As always, you're a visionary, optimistic, like a master. You open our eyes. In Agromin, we debate, we analyze, we say that agriculture and mining have always been together. And you know why? Because Well, I read that life starts with geology. The rocks decompose through millions of years, and the soils are formed in the last geological era. Well, because of time limitations, we have to close this, and the final comment would be that Gabriel explained the advantages and disadvantages of the so-called second agricultural reform. Milton complements with his experience and his knowledge, not only because of his work in agriculture, but also in production and housing, a more global vision, and talk to us about the legal aspects and the report on mining sustainable development. And in other words, here we are deciding, as Carlos said, the future of Peru. And if the decision makers listen to us, to analyze, to deepen the knowledge, what is missing in Peru. The more we know, the better we will make a decision. We need to identify the strengths and also our weaknesses. Peru is giving us a challenge, a huge challenge. As it was shown in the first graphic, we are a country of mountains. And that piece of territory that offers us everything. That is why we have become an agricultural and mining country. Mining country, maybe we were before because we are in the ranking as a supplier of essential elements. That is how they call it in the world, essential elements. And the food that we all have to take. Well, I think we finish with this block. And now we're going to move into the next topic. Thank you very much, Paula Fernando. Thank you, Ingeniero Mucho. I thank the speakers. Kindly turn on your camera for a picture. Thank you for all your comments. In this block that has been so important, substantial, and with the need to hear different voices. And we believe that this second convention, Agromin, provides the space to listen to the proposals, to listen to the voices, to listen about what we need to make progress from now onwards for a prosperous future in Peru. Thank you very much for your time.
We're going to start with topic development of suppliers and technology service. In this case, we have Giancarlo Tosticroce, leader of international markets at Mates United Australia, and Rómulo Mucho is chairman at PEBOES Contratistas. Both are going to be speakers of this specific section. And we will have 25 minutes for each of the speakers. I will let you know when you reach 20 minutes time so that you can handle your time. I'll be starting then now by giving the floor to the first speaker. And He's joining from Australia. Yeah, early in the morning for you, Giancarlo. 9, well, 10 a.m. actually. Okay. It's afternoon, night for this part of the world. Giancarlo Tosticrosa is an engineer, industrial engineer specializing on IT. He started working in the mining sector in Chile, specifically working in the expansion projects of Codelco. After studying a master's degree of scientific projects in Australia before joining Mets Ignited, he was leading a program on strategies for Chilean mining providers in Australia. Currently, in Mets Ignited, he's leading international markets and development opportunities for Mets. Thank you. And to these new technologies, we can close border frontiers. Welcome, Giancarlo.
Voy a comenzar con la presentación, compartir pantalla. ¿Me pueden confirmar que el audio está ok y ven la presentación?
Todo
Can
perfecto.
you let me know whether everything is okay?
Buenas tardes, buenos días para los que me están viendo acá en
Good afternoon, good morning for those of you connecting from Australia. My name is Giancarlo Roche. I'm in lead international markets in Cross United, and I would just like to talk about a specific sector that is enabling lots of opportunities in the company. We have seen in huge room for the introduction of new technologies, but this still plays an important challenge. We saw a great potential just by just applying a new change.
para traer nuevas tecnologías e innovaciones al mercado. Antes de entrar en
New providers. Before getting into details, I will just explain what is the company and what we have been doing and why we got up to this conclusion in Mets Ignited. So, who are we? I hope it works because I have this short video to share with you. Let's see.
¿Logran ver el video?
Can you watch the video? No, not yet.
Sure. Ahora sí.
I think now you can see this. Yes.
Mets Ignited is the Industry Growth Centre for Mining Equipment, Technology and Services, funded by the Federal Government's Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources. The role of Industry Growth Centres is to accelerate the commercialisation of innovation, to enhance industry skills and capabilities, and to grow exports in areas where Australia has a proven competitive advantage. Australia's Mets sector is a recognised world leader in innovation and technology, delivering the safety, environmental and productivity outcomes that sustain our global resources sector. Of these technologies, not only for the mining industry, but for the benefit of all industry sectors. We do this by investing in collaborative projects, bringing together mining companies with Mets vendors, researchers and investors to deliver our world-leading technology and innovation in a commercially viable way. We provide training and support, helping our technology innovators productize their solutions to meet the needs of both the local market and to expand their offerings internationally. Mets Ignited also As a global leader, the success of Australia's Mets companies has created more highly skilled jobs and expanded the local economic contribution of Australia's leading technology sector. There is increasing global demand for our expertise in areas such as robotics and automation, data and analytics, as well as our highly experienced and capable engineering services. This is driving our future skills development. Industry, all building upon our experience, particularly in our remote and regional communities where these skills are needed most. As a leading technology sector, demand for critical minerals, sustainable energy, and reuse and recycling are all key themes for our future. The future needs of our energy. METS Ignited is accepting the responsibility to ensure that we have the skills and the technology to remain safe, to be sustainable, and that we commercialize our innovative solutions to make sure they are available for all. METS Ignited is driving outcomes, enabling our future, so we can continue to deliver on society's future resources needs.
Perfecto. ¿Me pueden escuchar, cierto? Sí.
I am back again. I think now you can hear me properly.
Ok, ¿cierto?
Sí, escuchamos y vemos
Gracias.
perfectamente.
Perfecto, gracias. Bueno, en resumen, como mostró el video, somos
In
el
summary,
Centro de Crecimiento para Industria METS y tenemos
we
una
are
misión
the
en
growth
fortalecer
center
nuestra
for
relación
METS
global de
industry,
innovación minera.
and
Nuestros
we want
objetivos
to
nos establecimos
look
en
for
alrededor
the
de
competitive
2015
advantage
como
of
uno
the
de los
mat
6 países
industry in
crecientes del mundo
Australia.
y somos
When we are
financiados por el
one
Centro
of
de
those
Industria, Ciencia,
6
Tecnología
large
y Desarrollo
centers
Federal
that got resources from the federal government of Australia.
Y nuestros objetivos son básicamente
Our
los que
main
están ahí en la parte
objectives are
izquierda.
listed
Acelerar la comercialización de la innovación, mejorar las habilidades de la industria,
to invest,
aumentar la
to
exportación y
fill the
mejorar el retorno
gaps,
de los
to
negocios en el que
create
operamos.
capacity building efforts, and to increase our international presence.
Ups. Porque no funciona la...
I don't know why isn't the animation working on the screen. Apologies for that.
Sí. Durante el periodo operacional en que ha operado Mets United, hemos invertido alrededor de 13
Since
millones
its inception, we have invested 30 million US Australian dollars, sorry, with 26 projects of commercialization of the IT in the mining sector.
de 66 empresas han participado en estos proyectos y hemos entregado al mercado alrededor de 20 productos.
We had around 75 companies and operators associated to this project. We expect to get these products to reach a value this technology is not only applicable for mining industries, but also for spatial and security facilities as well. These projects of collaborative project funds allowed MET companies to adopt new technologies. Stakeholders such as METs, mining companies, and large manufacturers work jointly to provide specific results for the mining industry. The results have to go through this whole process. It should be the different side or types of services provided. Our projects are focused on commercialization of these specific projects. So this has to be easily applicable to the business, and benefits should be also already highlighted. We also have since 2015 Due to the pandemic, we also suffer some negative impacts, but we have 6 or 7 new proposals for these specific funding projects. And we have capital to work on the development for such projects. As achievements, we have created awareness on data analytics, automatization, and robotic use. We have promoted the collaboration among different industries. And round number 4, for instance, we had 16 applications with a total of 16 companies working together. We have also fund projects under the whole value chain, and the portfolio of high quality projects are included in as part of our work. Lesson learned from Mets Ignited working with med providers. Not necessarily fitted for business models for the whole industry. Our researchers focus on technical part and final user requirements and processes, and also try to find guidelines on when efforts of research have to be focused. Investigation centers have to look at different opportunities. There's a disconnection in between what innovator does and research as such, but I do not mean this connection in the sense of topics. It's just basic fact that they work isolated and discussing on several same topics, but they do not necessarily are closely connected. Sometimes investors and venture capitals or private equity in governments do not necessarily understand the whole value and the impact on the investment return. We saw that there's an importance change reflected on services with a more commercial point of view. And industry providers, most are vendors, either manufacturers or IT and telecommunication resellers. But most of the vendors have also worked with different industries, not only the mining industry, as a technology that is applicable for other sectors, as I mentioned before. But those vendors have some issues to access to a direct investor or customer. And these are actually the two main large barriers for growth. Mining companies tend to have very specific needs. It's difficult to include compared to other capital markets. Mining is difficult to dimension. It can be complicated to serve as a vendor to the industry. And finally, investors, the whole private equity, venture capitalists, local and foreign, And even technology companies and mining companies that may have this type of investments are different to the operational side. They may be investors that are basically, this is due to the efforts focused on sustainability, renewable energies, and minerals, which is also part of our strategy at a country level, but also technologies related to innovation among different sectors or cross-sectorial initiatives. What should we do? As a result of the commitment and work, we have realized that, technically speaking, there are technologies developed, but the solutions are not necessarily feasible. Productizing is key, so to try to turn a technology into a, when you work with this specific innovation in Australia, specifically Met United want to increase the value added by research so that it could be commercialized for the benefit of a country. We tend to translate the needs of sectors, translate them into products and service. This means that uh, looking for the different opportunities and trying to present those or showcase them to industry representatives.
Aquí nosotros vemos que todos pueden ganar algo en el modelo.
We can all win. It's a win-win approach.
Tales como que los precios sean sostenibles.
Sustainable pricing, capital venture be appropriate. Due to the high demand on innovation, we have identified multiple opportunities for investments. We have been working closely with industry players to know the needs and identify the gaps in the roadmaps. We have also set up the potential of investment for innovation.
Debido a esto, queremos definir el futuro
We
modelo
want to define the future, the model of different vendors for the delivery of the functions and the support needed to bring back these technologies on board. Basically, we cannot just simply think on a quotation for innovation. We need to adapt innovation to our different units and practices, and we need to look for the companies that have the know-how so that mining companies trust that those commitments will be achieved and covered.
Nosotros estamos buscando básicamente el apoyo.
Basically, we are looking for the support of the industry to create a new ecosystem that shows sustainability, not only for one part, technologically speaking, but also the market has to feel attracted to these possibilities. If we actually want to achieve and show the maximum potential of those providers, we follow the Australia's Global Resources Strategy, which is recognized worldwide. And this is almost the end of class. In be able to add value, it is important to have a list of providers and contact to accelerate the conversion to those technologies to enhance and Let's ignite it. We would like to search for companies, allies that would like to work together with the S. This is a great opportunity to share our experience in this platform. And if you have doubts or questions, please contact us and Ignite United. And thank you very much. Thank you, Giancarlo Tosti. Thanks for your work. And it is such a great example, quite interesting presentation. We have been talking on these 2 days how important it is to look for new proposals and alternatives to, of course, work. Thank you for such an interesting presentation. And now that we are in this section of today, let's now give the floor to Rómulo Mucho.
Lo presentamos como expositor. Él es ingeniero de
We introduced him as a speaker. He's a mining engineer with 30 years of experience with studies in Sweden, Canada, and he was founder in the construction of projects as important as Camisea, Antamina, Lagunas Norte, Cerrolito, Las Bambas, Constancia, Expansión, Cerro Verde, Peñaveco, among others. In the state, he was a congressman of the Republic, president of Implement, vice minister of mine, and he's a professor of the president of the mining chapter of the School of the Association of Engineers of Peru. He was president of the Institute of Mines of Peru, president of SME, president of the Association of Contractors, and president of Agromin since 2018 up to date. He is the president of this event. He received award of the Peruvian Engineering of the Association of Engineers of Peru, and also the SME from the United States for PhDs, honoris causa by national universities, and he's been a speaker in national and international speaker, author of the book Peru, Agro-Mining Country. We are very proud to be aware of the professional background of engineer Rómulo Mucho to introduce him as the speaker of the floor. Thank you. I'm very pleased. I'm very happy to participate in this event that gathers the citizens that we want to learn more about what we have here in our country. The presentations have been brilliant so far. Dr. Carlos Amat y León, a visionary, he shows his strength to move forward in the country. I am going to share my presentation. I work for more than 20 years in the private cement companies, in the underground companies. Then I thought that it was the time to be a freelance, and so I did with my own initiative. Since I was a student, I always thought about this, to be owner of my fate. I always tell my students, you don't have to knock on the doors of a company all the time. You have to get ready to take risks. At some point, you will be a specialist in something and you can provide services. And I think that has given excellent results in Peru. There is experience of successful people. However, we need public policies that give more support, not in terms of money, just public policies with incentives and promotion in order to increase the foreign currency coming to the country and generate more jobs. Giancarlo, an excellent presentation. Australia is a model country. Today, METS in English, mining equipment technology. Yeah, technology services, yes. And this in Australia, it is a success, a reality. And Chile, and a mining neighbor country, they have a cluster city, Antofagasta. I have visited several times and I'm always surprised. They have a long story, the providers. I think it all started in Sweden. Sweden was always a mining country. We will remember the best steel came from Sweden, the iron. They had polymetallic mines, gold mines. They have the most technological mining advance in the world. And they have an open pit mine called IPIC, where they produce 100,000 tons of ore per day and 100,000 tons of waste, one to one. And to produce that, they have 540. A mine of that size in Peru would need at least 2,000 workers or more. This means that they have automated machinery, robotic controls, and that also allows to exploit the deposits 0.22 is the grade of copper. 0.22 of copper in Peru is a very high grade. And it is stored in some deposits of low grade that it was expected that someday technology will arrive and we will benefit from that. In Sweden, they are benefiting from that. I am sure here, with the technology that arrives to the country, it will be possible to benefit in the low-grade deposits. Okay, now I have a rather short presentation. Mining has an economic cycle. We can see it here. It begins with exploration, which is the search in the crust of the earth, where we have they are studying all the geological aspect, the formation of the batholite, the coast, and the rocks. So it starts with investment, with exploration. If it's successful, that's okay. Now the deposits easy to find are not out there anymore. Then once that you find and you have the detailed engineering, it takes a lot of time. Antamina is a long-range mine. The average for a mine of middle size, it would take 10 years to develop the mine. This doesn't happen overnight. When they say the grade is low, they say that we say start doing the mine now, because tomorrow it will change and tomorrow we will have different times. Now the prices are high, but the circumstances that the metals that are called essential elements will be used maybe twice or fourfold in the future, because they will serve for the transition to renewable energies, some more than others. Nickel, cobalt, lithium. Cobalt and lithium, we don't have that. Well, we have a new discovery of lithium that can make a lot of history. That could be even one of the largest in the world. Once you have built the infrastructure, then we have the provision of services, engineering, contractors, assemblers, metal mechanics, everything is related to service. Once you have the infrastructure, you start production, either underground or open pit operations. And the size will depend on the tonnage or volume that has been found. And then after production, if it's a concentrate or if it is a cathodes, especially copper and gold, comes export. Export this year, it is likely that we are going to hit the records until September. We already in mining had reached about $25 billion, more or less. That was the production of last year in mining. So in September, maybe 1,000 tons less this year. October, November, and December. Well, because now we have some issues, we were projecting amounts for export. The figures that I'm saying that for total exports, we were estimating about $55 billion, a record figure, not only in mining, but in our products of agro export, as Dr. Amat mentioned. And then comes the payment of tax, income tax, income on the earnings, because this could be a special tax to mining activities, special taxes. There are 5 taxes paid by the mining sector. Transferred to subnationals, the mining canon, the mining royalties. Here, we would see all the funds that are provided by the mining companies, social funds for development, fund trusts, or for development of the community. Some companies really are an example, providing millions of dollars a year, and that is not part of the taxes. Apart, we have the tool works for taxes that still has to be organized. And this goes beyond in the construction of infrastructure, more schools, more hospitals, more roads. The funds collected in the past decade and in the past amount more than 240 billion soles. The question is, where did the money go? So, within all the work that we have carried out these years and all the policy, industrialization, added value, added the topic of the day, analyzing the performance of the world, at present, we would like to provide added value, but it is China is the main competitor to everyone. China produces even a needle at low price. If we wanted to apply something, the price would be higher than the Chinese price for many reasons. China's production is at large scale, so they have a cheap labor. They have flooded the world, so they became the big factory of the world. Chinese companies are also large investors in Peru. We would like for them to teach us something about their manufacturing process. Because in Chile, China has installed a research center, and they don't have investment in mining, but he's the big buyer of the products, and they have installed a research center. And China should also do the same here in Peru. So, where are the opportunities? If we have some disadvantages, the mining is the key to industrialize Peru. It is the key because I work on that. I mean, that's why I say so. In Peru, the capacity of the Peruvian person is huge. The contractors, the providers, they are already manufacturing pieces. They are manufacturing spare parts, maybe not of high specialization, a hydraulic pump or something for transmission. We have not reached that point yet. But, for example, the arms, this equipment, some for the machinery are manufactured here, but not at the biggest scale like they are doing in Antofagasta. And this brings the formation of specialized human capital. And it shares all the information and all the sustainable development practices, and also an exchange of regulatory practices and contributing to the technological development. Somehow, we receive from the countries that have global companies, they bring the technology that it is used in Australia or Canada or South Africa or any other place in the world. To be competitive, we have to see what has been discovered there. And obviously, this development of suppliers, in Sweden, they have Euromine. It's a city that's rather small, but everything that they show is a new product and innovation. They have a fair that says, show if you have invented something. No, we don't take products for representation. I always say you should go to Sweden because many products started there and now they are all over the world. Where is the detail? Those manufacturers are doing it. If there would be public policies to support more the development of suppliers in Peru, well, they call it cluster to all the chain of production. I think the history would change in very short time because the Peruvians are getting ready. But we need to group people. We need to install in a region, as an example, to provide services to large companies or middle-sized companies, quite not to the small companies also. The OECD is working on this topic for the development of the regions. We have participated in several meetings of the OECD because the OECD has been in the past member, but I think it's crossing with other institutions. People from the OECD bring their proposals, their initiatives. If there is a mining region, that mining region should be developed. If there are several mining regions in the world, annually, 2 or 3 times, the OECD gathers people. Why don't they have a meeting in Peru? Because we are still not members of the OECD. There was a project, even though if we are not of growth, initial they have resources. the compliance of the law, population, and density. The potential for endogenous growth exogenous growth. We need the growth that is within Peru, within the Peruvian citizens, can activate through the identification and development of new economic activities based and combined with the existing strengths. Here we see the academia, a mining company, the need, the state that regulates this production chains. The nor in Australia, South Africa, Sweden, or Canada. They all work together because they need each other. Governments, because it is the one that fixes the rules of the game. The companies, because they have the needs. And the universities, they have to provide knowledge. Here, I think we should write the financing entity. Who's going to finance the work? Cyro is very powerful. Every year they are accountable. They say how much we have invested in innovation and how much money had that innovation produced. I remember 2 or 3 years ago they said 1 billion we have invested in this year, but with that innovation we have recovered $5 billion. That is a result. To stimulate the secondary effects of knowledge and transmission of information over the bottlenecks and the opportunities for development. We are always going to find bottlenecks. Well, the bottleneck in Peru is all the steps, all the regulations, very tedious processes that get you bored. And there is opportunity. In Peru, there are many possibilities. Sometimes they bring products from abroad, in this case, the local industry could replace the products that come from abroad. The challenge of public policies like develop collaborative institutions that support local innovation, integrating value chains. The value chain is very important. Every process in the mining adds value. So within the value chain, we find the supply chain, and that is the logistics, the global logistics. We speak very little about that. Mining is mining, they say, yes. Well, they sell you rocks, they say. But within the mining sector, there is a lot of risk, effort, knowledge, and also a lot of value because they use technology, they use people, they employ people, and they multiply the jobs. The Peruvian Institute of Economy shows a figure every year. It says direct mining job generates 8 jobs. Last year, they say 6.25. The last study says 9 jobs are generated. If you have 100,000 workers, well, at present there are 200,000 direct employments in Peru. If we multiply that by 8, well, we would have like 1,700 Peruvians that depend on the mining. Could be more, obviously, if we develop the production chains. One of the important points is governance. Giancarlo mentioned the policies of companies. in the beginning, because governance is a shared vision. Governance is the compliance of the law. Governance is what are you going to do with the money that you are going to receive? Nobody knows because the regulations are poorly made depending on the regions. There are no plans, no programs. How are you going to use have the canon, the royalties, the taxes? These transferences increase the capacity of expenditure of the national governments, obviously, because they get more money. But the effectiveness of these transfers is determined by fiscal incentives for a better decision-making and economy of scale. This means that part of this money, of this transfer, if the region knows that they can strengthen a productive chain, well, they invest in training, maybe some type of financing, or at least in the policies within the region. Institutional policies, the rules of the game for the development of the region, because it is from this region that the resource is collected and generates the taxes. That's for the development, and also it has to have an impact in the life quality. The political implications, key topics, there are limited levels for innovation, lack of diversification in the economy. Yes, we speak a lot about collective diversification. It is not something that will be excluding, but we need to diversify the economy. As a starting point, I could say that this would be for mining because this is the opportunity to industrialize the companies, for them to be the example to other industries. The fishing industry, well, the agricultural industry is making significant progress. We need the networks and the integration in the value chains of the companies. The companies know what they need, but they are not aware of the capacities outside. And the ones that are outside, they don't know what the companies need. So that's because there is lack of information. I need this. Do you have the capacity? But sometimes the companies look at the catalog and they come from Canada or any other country, and there is a lack of trust between the stakeholders. Well, the government today is not generating any trust. Limited information for those responsible of the policies on the bottlenecks of development. The political implications and the action areas. Well, we need to develop a common vision for the regions to build governance, to build trust. Trust is very important. As Francis Fukuyama says, I recommend always read the book called Trust, and to create also mechanisms to promote technological transfer. This transfer could be more intensive. That depends on us. Development of the supply chains, development of the work labor force, technology transfer, research, development, and innovation. Well, what is an industrial cluster for mining? Is the generation of value chains as a result of the impact of a mining project. That's a building capacity, technology, innovation. We could add the capacity for partnership and the competitiveness. We have to work on that. In Peru, we don't have a lot of partnerships with the purpose to generate regional investment, opening opportunities to other markets. Can we say that in our country we have mining clusters? No, there is a project for mining clusters. There is a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of words, a lot of meetings. I think it is time for decision making. Well, there are some companies that have established some support, but they do not work as clusters. That's a special area that for the user, for the company, could be easier to have access to a center where he will find the service required. And obviously the consolidation of the value chain and the role of the mining suppliers. When we talk about the value chain, we're talking about suppliers. All the value chain in the mining sector is value systems for strategic planning and competitiveness, and also the promotion of the use of international standards, not only for Peru, but also we can go across the borders. This part is very important to industrialize Peru. We will talk about replacing imports and things like that. Here, what always calls my attention is the asymmetry of our exports. 78% of our traditional products are exported, and 22 products are the non-traditional. Traditional products are the products that have low technological participation, like coffee and others. 22% non-traditional products, because they at least have gone through a process and they have technological content. So the topic, it always was to revert this. So most of our exports should be manufactured products, non-traditional products. I can give you the example of Mexico. Mexico in the 80s had a similar situation. It was almost 80% of traditional products, 20% of manufactured. Thanks to the FTA with the United States, now this has been reversed. So they are exporting a lot of manufactured products. You have 5 minutes. So the industry generates quality employment. So the government should promote the industrialization with a diversified productive system. These are some charts I am going to show very quickly. And this is the mining providers. We have other industries for development of the providers: construction, agro-industry, oil, electricity, water, and other public services, renewable energies. It's very interesting to see the percentage of how much each industry develops. Especially, this is for mining. All these activities, well, these are the services providers per item or specialty: maintenance, contractor engineering, mine services, technological services, diverse services, consulting, transportation, manufacturing, environmental management, sales, communities, water and energy related services, administrative, water services. They do not offer services. These are companies. So this is just to give you a vision of, like a photograph. And here you have the suppliers of equipment per line or specialty. You have manufacture, distribution, leasing, services, construction, sales. And this is important, very important. What is the percentage of the GDP is added by the services. In Peru, it is around percent. In Chile, 6%. And in Australia, 8%. What is the meaning of this? That by developing the suppliers, you can double the GDP in the mining activity. Here, we are not at the ground. We still need to be advanced. In Chile, they are more advanced. In Australia, they double the GDP. And 10% is the mining GDP, 8% more, almost the fifth part. If you increase the GDP, obviously you will generate more qualified jobs and more profits. Here, this is an interesting information. Purchases of mining companies to the suppliers amount to $10 billion every year. 66% of the supplier companies are located in Lima. 93% states that innovation is part of the business strategy. 30% participate of a guild association. 18% of to the mines amount to 4%. Last one that we saw was 3%. 30% of companies export to the United States, Colombia, Bolivia, Ecuador, Chile, Brazil, and Argentina. In Kazakhstan, I found some Peruvian manufactured machines. 71% of the companies declare that innovation is very important. That should be 99%. 69% of companies are middle-sized or small, the MIPES, we call them. 56% of these companies participate in collaborative projects. The category of innovation, the technology of the industry incorporated in the suppliers companies. We're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. We still have a small percentage. This in Australia is around 60 or 70%. Well, just to finish, if we talk about industrialization, I firmly believe that it can be done. The best example in the past was given by the Cerro de Pasco Copper Corporation. It was a US company that operated in 6 mines in the central area of Peru with hydroelectric plants. At the beginning, they brought everything. They bought everything. They said, no, we are going to be self-sufficient. They started to have a smelter for everything, for the mills, ball mills, crushers, special smelters. They wanted explosives. They made a plant for explosives. They wanted chemical reactives, and they made a special plant. And so they gave value to the copper because they were manufacturing. All those companies today are private companies. They are operating, but that's there for the development. It also worked in agromining because they developed the Junin race. They brought it from New Zealand, some bovines, and then they had a new breeding race. It was an achievement in the area for the breeders, but that was affected by the agricultural reform. So this encouraged these companies. Resemin, for example, is a company that manufactures capital goods, drilling machines for rocks, scalers for anchoring bolts and for the use of rocks. And they sell their product to the 5 continents. At present, they are in Kazakhstan, in Africa, Canada, Chile, Ecuador, Argentina. Geotech is a Peruvian company for diamond drilling, for mining exploration. Ingetrol, they also have the diamond drillers. It's a Peruvian company with manufacturing in Chile. The owner is from the US, but he is a manufacturer in raised borders, and he's exporting to Australia. Exa and Famesa, well, Exa is not very independent, but they used to be manufacturers of explosives. FEMA is very well known. It's a manufacturer of machinery and equipment for crushing and milling for a concentrate plant. DSI and Genmar, they have elements for rocks. Renasa, that was in Cerro de Pasco, it's a private company. Inmin, my friend Alba, who rests in peace, they manufacture cars, mining, locomotives, and they are exporting to other countries. Front loaders, rock drill, they manufacture machinery for diamond drilling and for underground mining. And there are more. I have seen others in Las Vegas learning, looking for information. And the biggest companies have a stand in the international fairs. So we were not at the right start. There is a foundation, but it should be bigger. It could be. We would be talking about METs, technological advance in capital goods. This is the opportunity that is waiting for us. So otherwise, well, I have a lot to say about Las Vegas. I like to share the new things that we find in a fair. We have to always look for new developments, new technologies, new services. You have there in the fair, you can speak with the manufacturer attention, and it's been a very intensive day. Thank you. Thank you, Ingeniera Mucho. Really, it is very interesting to see that Peru has a big potential and a lot of work ahead. I would like to thank you for sharing your experiences and also the need to know about the work that is being developed in other countries and the necessary variables to generate a sustainable development. Now we're running short of time as an where items will be developed with each one of the fundamental axes that were discussed during this second convention. Thank you very much. In this way, we close the block of development of suppliers and services of technology. Very quickly, we go to the final block. We will have a conference about the objective of sustainable development. Rosa Galvez is specialized in health engineering. She has a master's degree and a doctorate in environmental science at the McGill University from 2011 to she worked in Quebec and she celebrated 25 years of success in the academic and research. He was member of independent senator of the Senate of Canada by President Trudeau. She was elected as president of the Parliament Network Climate Change for the Americas, a network of the Parliament members. I am very pleased to close today with a conference on the objective of sustainable development. Good afternoon. Well,
Qué hermoso. Muchas gracias por la invitación. Siempre estoy
Thank
muy
you for
feliz
the invitation. I'm always
de juntarme con mis
happy to
compañeros y
join
conciudadanos peruanos.
and
Ah,
meet with.
Vamos a compartir mi...
I'll be now sharing my screen now.
¿Estamos ahí? ¿Lo están viendo?
La vemos perfectamente y la escuchamos también muy bien. Adelante.
Ok. Bueno, de nuevo, gracias al gobierno peruano, gracias
So thank you
a Agromin,
to
gracias,
the government
felicitaciones
of
por el
Peru.
bicentenario del Perú.
Congratulations
A mí
for the
me gustaría hablarles
bicentenary
de
of
cómo
Peru.
la
Today, I would
minería
like to talk
durable y
about
sostenible puede ser
how
una
sustainable
palanca de desarrollo siempre y cuando respetemos esta
mining could
perspectiva del desarrollo
be a
sostenible. Entonces,
driver
primero,
for
un poquito sobre
development
mí.
if we keep
A mí
on
me
the
dicen mucho que soy una experta en
environmental
y les
sustainable
quiero explicar por qué.
approach. I've been told
Inicialmente, el
that
ingeniero
I was a
hablamos y
champion
tratamos
on.
agua potable, tratamiento
Basically,
del
I will explain
desagüe,
you
más
why
tarde
we
estuve
talk on these different
en tratamiento de los
issues
lodos,
related to
más
water
tarde me
treatment,
ocupé de los
slash
suelos
treatment. I used
contaminados,
to
de los
work
sitios
with
mineros abandonados
pollution,
aquí en
abandoned
Quebec
sites in
y
Quebec,
después me
where
fui
I'm
para
based.
el
I
manejo de
then
sustancias
worked
peligrosas
on
y
hazardous
siendo
material
ingeniero
management
civil
and as a
sanitario, pues
civil
entonces las
sanitary
cuestiones del
engineer,
calentamiento climático y
climate
de estos
change
eventos climáticos extremos
and extreme
que
climate
tienen un efecto dominó
events,
sobre
a
la
domino
salud, la
effect
seguridad
on health
de las naciones, de las
and
ciudades,
safety of
me
nations and
llevó también
cities
a estudiar esta
led me to
problemática.
study this
Entonces,
specific
esto
field.
evidentemente que me ha llevado a través de todo el mundo, tanto en América
I've traveled all
Latina
around
como
the world in Latin
parte
America,
del
Europe,
norte.
and in North
Y
America.
estoy aquí para contarles un poco de esta experiencia.
And I will talk about this
Entonces,
specific
yo lo que
experience.
pienso es de que tenemos muchos problemas que
We face is important for
sabemos de
human
que
life.
esos problemas están interrelacionados,
Problems are
y
interconnected.
necesitamos tener una visión holística,
We
una
need to have
visión
an
completa,
holistic,
integral de lo que está
comprehensive
pasando.
view,
Entonces, muchas
integrated
veces vamos
view
a
of what is
decir, bueno, hay
happening
una
today.
sobrepoblación
You may probably think
consiste
overpopulation
que tiene consecuencias en un
that
sobreconsumo de energía,
impact
de
on the
alimentos, productos
overconsumption of energy,
manufacturados, y
food,
esto está a veces
produced goods, and
tratamiento por
this
una
is
buena
sometimes
gobernanza
regulated
o por una
thanks to a
gobernanza
good
que está
governance, or
causando
maybe
que
sometimes
los
it is
cambios tecnológicos
not
inicialmente
managed by
utilizaban
any
tecnologías
governance at all.
que
And
contaminaban
governments
muchísimo.
were
Hoy
using
día
sometimes
se trata
technologies
de tener
that
tecnologías que
were
son más respetuosas con el
polluting,
ambiente y que
but
contaminan
this is no
menos,
longer the
pero
case.
también
We
tenemos
have
cosas, claro,
technologies
por ejemplo,
that are less
nuestra economía que es lineal, que vamos a hablar
polluting,
de eso
and
porque
the
podemos tener
economy
economía circular, pero todavía
could
estamos en un
change. It could
capitalismo
become
bastante
a circular economy,
extremo
but at this
de
point, we
extracción y
still
uso
have
y
a capitalist
desperdicio. Y esto
economy
está
and
llevando
looking
a
at
estas
ways
alteraciones
that
en,
the
esta,
huge levels
en
of
este patch que está
pollution.
flotando de
Let's
plástico
look
en
at
las
this batch
superficie del
of
tamaño de
plastic
Francia,
bags
tenemos
in the
20 veces
Pacific
y
that
entonces
is
pues
probably almost the
evidentemente
size of
estando nosotros
France, floating in the
y los
Pacific Ocean.
la flora y la fauna
The
salvaje
flora and
expuesta a
fauna,
estos
wild species
contaminantes, pues
exposed to
entonces
all these
podemos
different
también
pollutants.
causar daños en la evolución
We could
biológica.
also
Y aparte de esto,
impact
claro,
the
tenemos la psicología,
biological
la ética,
evolution.
la
We have
cultura, cosas que
psychology,
son más,
ethics,
podríamos decir,
culture,
subjetivas
which are more
y no
subjective
necesariamente son fáciles de
and
manejar,
are not so
que
easy to
también están
handle, but
influenciando
still
esta problemática.
influence all these
Entonces, cuando
different
tenemos este
problems.
complejo, esta
With such a
situación,
complex condition,
la solución requiere de un cambio de
a
paradigma. Tenemos que
solution
pasar de este análisis en túnel que
will
teníamos antes de ver
need a
una sola cosa a la
change,
vez.
a shift
Tenemos que
of
aprender
mindset. We need to
mirar los problemas
learn on trying to understand a global approaches of each issue, but we also need to change values. I always follow World Economic Forum, Global Risk Report, and they refer to several data where you have economic risk, environmental, geopolitical, societal, and technological risks, especially for those Latin American countries. How can we relate the lack of governance, such as tax evasion, that could mean loss of income for the government, liquidity loss, and this balances at the budgetary level that create social inequalities that will create interest on democracy, and there's a promotion of corruption, failure of governance, instability of basic economic sectors, and in Latin America, basic uses natural resources or commodities that make us really difficult to adapt to climate change and to reduce greenhouse emissions. Therefore, we have this vicious circle we cannot get out from. As of the WEF, main concerns are related to environmental impact, climate change, and that will probably last many years if we are not able to change this. One solution is to revert the domino effect, consolidate through collaboration, accountability, start with positive action in all the different sectors, cross-cutting view by really looking at the real causes and not the symptoms. This may sound complex. I write a lot. This is from 2nd of November, and the multiple crises and how we can break that domino effect so that we can get out of this crisis. My other peers, scientific colleagues, they've been working already on the planetary limits. This is a concept that shares 9 main processes for the stability that allowed human beings to live in this planet. These systems are related to quality of water, air, ocean quality, biodiversity. We were told that we are negatively impacting 4 or 5 out of those 9 systems are already in the red zone. This is showing danger. But there's another group of scientists that says that the economy, sustainable economy, can be found in an area which is limited by a specific ground, foundation, social benefits, access to water, energy, to food, to education, we have access to justice, etc., and an ecological ceiling, which is followed by these 9 processes I mentioned before. If we get up to 1.5, I think we're now at 1.1. If we go beyond 1.5, because of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we could definitely reach up the tip of dramatic change, drastic change that may imply a loss of lives and human security without limits. You have done this social ground and ecological ceiling within this circle. there's a safe space, a fair so that humans can live. And this could be achieved with the use of regenerative and redistributive economy to keep on the standards of life for future generations. In Canada, we are, I don't know how to say this, we feel this urgency, this climate urgency. In the southern part of Canada, the border with the US, 80% of the population lives next to this border, and this area is hitting twice as much as the average of the Earth. And the Canadian Arctic is getting higher temperatures compared to the other parts of the planet. Scientists have been saying for over 30 years that that will imply health risk issues that will have some dangerous travel conditions that will be impacts on health because of the heat waves and humidity waves, diseases that will come from zoonosis. COVID-19 is not the first pandemic. When we look at the different diseases, progression and frequency of the moving from a virus from wild fauna to human beings is not new. We have seen that H1N1 was this disease that proved this to be true. So we are impacting the wild fauna, and this is impacting human life. But climate change can also be seen as an opportunity to develop clean energies in technologies to improve the life of societies and human beings so that we can come closer. We know that we are sharing the same atmosphere, we're breathing the same air no matter where we are, whether in Peru or in Canada. This is one atmosphere, and we see that this is a thin layer that we all need to take care of. So for Canada, if they said that if we reduce the greenhouse gases emissions to zero up to 2050, we could be saving more than 30.5 million US dollar by 2050. Climate change impact infrastructures. I talk about industries, mining companies, other industries as well. Remember the tailings at mine sites because of large erosion and rainfall. In all these different events, we are realizing that urban infrastructure can be hit, and these are interdependent activities. If one thing fails, we may see failures in different areas. Telecommunication, cable, internet, everything may fail if they are interconnected. So again, the domino effect. Of course, this will not impact all at the same level. Indigenous communities, poor communities, coastline. In Canada, which has the largest coastline, we have 3 oceans in our territories, the impact on the coastline. But again, in Peru, you also have a long coastline that is impacted by El Nino and La Nina, but it's also been experiencing the increase of temperatures of the sea. In the Arctic, we have the permanent frost that is melting out, and the mines located up north only have the ice. The melting of ice is creating such instability in transportation structures for them as well. When we see pollutants, I've studied a lot the ecotoxic danger or hazard. In this case, you have a waste pile. It could be any plant or industry where you have waste piles. These are sources that maybe the municipality and certain authorities know of its existence, but the owner got bankrupt, left the country, or died. So we do not necessarily need to know what exactly or who that person or owner was, but at the end, people know that there is a source of pollution. If this pollution gets onto groundwater or to the river, pollution will travel around these different surfaces, and it could be transported thousands and thousands of kilometers away. I was working in a fire with hazardous materials, and we have these three conditions. We have oil getting into underground, petroleum getting into a main river in Quebec. And since it was a fire because of this oil spill, and there was a huge fire, and that was polluting the air. This could reach people that do not necessarily know of the source, and that will be exposed to these maybe reduced level of pollution, but maybe for many years. So depending on whether the pollution will go through the earth, water, or air, it will move easily or quickly or lower at the soil is contained because soil is a good filter. But at the very end, there will be exposure at some extent, and it could be highly concentrated, and you can have a good impact. But also other cases where you have long-term exposure in minimum concentrations where you have chronic diseases or chronic impacts. The same will apply for the flora and fauna. Both the fish, there will be a process of exposure in accumulation that will impact the area. Nutrition, for instance, on this specific species is covered by salmon. And if there's any problem with salmon, or everything is interconnected through lots of ground water resources, lakes, especially in specific areas in Canada. So if we have a mercury spill, you can have a bioaccumulation, but through the trophic chain, you can have a biomagnifier. I've studied all these different processes, and I survey all these different processes. I see how a pollutant travel around a cell in organism population, the biogenesis, the ecosystem of the biosphere, and pollutes all these different links within the chain. And it could be discovered, like in the previous case of the fire, you can have tumors on fish or deformations on the wild species. in this case is Peru. I know that mining or creating job opportunities means for living and social and political or economic developments are very bad. We also need to think that costs associated to externalities have to be taken into account. It could be probably more expensive than the economic benefit, and this is something that we are experiencing here in Canada. But we have seen that. We see that calculations are showing that restoration, remediation for these different areas and the change of the cost of the impact of health for First Nations populations could definitely be way too high to the project itself. So we need to be very careful on these specific examples to try to make mining a sustainable activity. In Quebec, we have good experiences. Uh, we have an environmental asset costs are pretty high. We have around 10,000 abandoned mines, and we are looking at more than 6 billion US dollars for rehabilitation efforts. So how do we get up to a sustainable mining? Sustainability should be in connection with mining industries. I think recycling and reuse of ores could maybe extend the use of these metals throughout the whole chain for future generations. So the concept of sustainability could be applicable to mining. There are also social benefits, technological development related to sustainable growth. We need to conciliate sustainability and mining. In order to do so, we need to optimize. Sustainable mining is this minimization of the negative environmental impacts and social and economic impacts associated to mining activities to get up to levels that will not exceed the capacity to create new sources, substitute, or recycle any specific material in order to not to commit the future generation needs. What I'm referring to is basically the idea of moving from as a simple only revenue maximizing industry towards this whole efficient process and the use of what we extract goes through effective process and the use of resources that we need for extract the materials. And finally, to project us towards the future, to tell us that not only our generation should enjoy these specific resources, but also future generations. The Canadian Mining Association does adhere responsible mining, accountable mining by promoting the inclusion of communities, native communities of Canada, specifically the promotion of environmental practices and the commitment and follow-up of world standards, a commitment to health and safety of employees and communities by following principles of responsibility, transparency, and credibility. The program has been set in 204 and has its main goal to allow mining companies to comply with the needs of the society in a more responsible way, not only in economic terms, but also social and environmental. My area of expertise, effectiveness and efficacy, because lots of our waste still have copper residues, zinc, copper that could be used and have economic value, but are left aside because the methodology, the processes, and metallurgical processes did not allow for a further extraction. I was working with fungus and with bacteria that create organic acids that could economically extract more or by using, for instance, agricultural waste. So you have waste from the mining industry, waste coming from the agricultural production, and we bring both together to create a value chain. As the previous speaker mentioned, value chain, and we make it more efficient, more efficient, and more sustainable. Lots of remediation technologies have been applied. I've been working, even developed myself many of them. The in situ, the ones that I use on site, or when you excavate soils and you bring it to a lab or somewhere else, ex situ. I work on lots of biological, on nature-based solutions through bioremediation and phytoremediation, but specifically, I was also working with the caping, with the recovery, electrocinetics, solidification by using cement, and also chemical by using the acid washing oxidation, and finally, by the very end, when nothing else is left and you cannot recycle, we can talk about a sanitary feeling. We need to move on to a circular economy. We need to move from a linear exponential economy that says that there's an infinite growth that is compatible with a finite planet. That's not true. We cannot keep on things working like that. In this whole linear process of extract, produce, manufacture, and then throw them away. Every 60% of everything what's extracted the land comes back to the land as waste. That's inefficient, non-effective, and that's the root of most of our problems. The circular economy model is based on three principles: to design waste and pollutants, to eliminate and to save them as products and materials as long as possible, and to regenerate natural systems. Helen MacArthur Foundation has worked on this specific graph, which shows that what we need to do is to collect our waste. If those are manufactured products, we can recycle, reuse, and then recycle them again if there's no way to repair them. And this is the non-organic part. And with organic waste, we need to try to degrade it to some level, create some sort of energy, restore, renew soils in order to create circles of value within the circular economy, which is more sustainable on time. What I mean is that any product should have to go through, if it's a waste, you have to think whether it can be reduced, reused, repair, rebuild, refurbish, refinish, resold, recycle, or composted, then it should be recycled. If it's not possible, then maybe we shouldn't allow that product to be part of the chain of production. We need to have new values. We have to think in an holistic, participatory, and cooperative way. We need to have new values and ethics. We need a water in, air clean. We definitely need to have a consensus and think on future generations and new actions that are aligned to these conservation measures, circular economy, the exclusive use of renewable resources, and protect, repair what is needed, what I just mentioned, and everything that we have destroyed. We need to think on population, yes, and we need to have a enhance our adaptability. Circular economy is closely related to the Sustainable Development Goals. These are the 17 goals, and most of them are closely related to these goals, as you can see. At the very end, what we want is, and I remember when I was an engineering student, we saw that the environment, the economy, and the society were three different circles that moved into different directions, and we should try to find a midpoint where they all interconnected and the sustainable development. Right now, that was a transition. This was a transition, but the truth is that what we actually need to do, and what we have to do, is that we need to take care of the environment, because the quality of life will depend on the quality of the environment. What we have is our socioeconomical model, which is we are part of the environment. And whenever there's a crisis, such as the COVID-19 or the 2008 economic crisis or climate change crisis, there are laws that cannot change. Gravity exists. The interaction of elements in chemical elements exists. We cannot change, but we can change our socioeconomic models, and to focus on those in order to think on the and think of a circular economy with a sustainable. It is projected that the world demand on material resources will double by 2016. That will result in a harder environmental damage that will increase more emissions and in more ways. Impacts are damaging lots of different sources of life in the planet. And as I said, the pandemic of COVID-19 has not destroyed the system. It has just said the gaps. Has shown the mistakes, the failures of the system which was damaged. So we need to do more, to be more than that. We need to do this quickly and start very much for your paying attention to me.
Galvez, por sus apreciaciones y también por
Thank you for your comments and for showing us the importance of provision and sustainability. That should be a word that has to be in all the disciplines, in all the professions. We don't have time to leave the changes for the future. There are many warnings provided by the nature, the environment, and the pandemic that show us that sustainability is the only way to have a safe future. Thank you very much for your intervention and for this very interesting conference that made us think a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the second day of the second convention, Agromin, in the virtual platform. We would like to thank again the sponsors, the collaborators, the media partners, and the strategic allies, and also the companies and institutes are part of the civic fair and the business roundtable. We are very grateful to the speakers, the panel members, and moderators who have joined us today to share their experiences, the learning through the professional experiences and the proposals to have a consensus for the future among all the stakeholders. We still have topics like the territorial, sustainable development. Some of the topics were some deep pending talks to continue moving toward a promissory future. We wait for you tomorrow at 9 o'clock punctually for the last and interesting day, where the big topic will be the conditions for the development of Peru, the proposal of agromining. Thank you. Good evening. See you tomorrow.